Alphabet or Google stock is down around 8% today as the AI chat war is heating up. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Daniel. You're watching Unrivaled Investing. What does this mean for Google when you see this increased investment by Microsoft into OpenAI, Chatgpt, rolling it out, and the competitive pressures for the search business? What does this mean potentially for Google long term? Where do I see Google stock going forward? If you enjoy educational videos, please make a point of hitting that subscribe button. So let's understand what's going on with Alphabet stock as it's down around 8% so far today, intraday. Well, actually, earlier this week, I was saying, hey, hypothetical question. If Microsoft announced a Chatgpt integration into Bing that's functional, accessible this week, does Google do nothing, maybe up, drop down a little, or watch out below, drop more than 10%. Most people thought, it's just a big nothing burger. Maybe it even goes up. And I personally was skeptical of that. I personally think this is the reason why I even did the question in the first place, that it would be an issue. And subsequently, after I posted that poll, Microsoft did announce that, hey, we're reinventing search with a new AI-powered Bing and Edge. So both their search tool as well as their internet browser Edge, and it's going to be your co-pilot for the web, offering a lot more functionality. It's not just ask a question, but now it's, you can ask it to do things. It's the attempt to have an intelligent chatbot that you can talk to. Hey, can you compose a poem? Can you plot a trip? Can you give me a recipe? And they're rolling this technology out, not just into Bing, which they're hoping to help disrupt Google's search business, but across many of Microsoft's products. For example, you have Microsoft Teams, you have Microsoft Office. If you wanted to compose something in Word, all of a sudden, in the past you had Clippy. Now you're going to have something where it's sort of saying, hey, you're having trouble with this. Can we help you? You want to write an email. Can we help you with this? Or maybe you give me a prompt in the style in which you want me to write a thank you note for XYZ, and boom, it can compose it for you. Or if you're doing Excel, trying to figure something out, it can help you with that. So we are going into a very exciting age where you have artificial intelligence making people so much more productive. And so Microsoft is saying, hey, this is an incredible tool with OpenAI. We are going to be integrating it throughout our company with lots of different solutions, but one of which is Bing, and they're trying to disrupt the search market. And several reporters got a first-hand look of what this means with the new AI-powered Bing. And based on several different reports, they're effectively saying search will never be the same because it's a direct integration. Whenever you want to talk to somebody or ask, some sort of question, you can get this AI ChatGPT response that'll give, you can ask it whatever you want, recipe, directions, thoughts about buying XYZ car, the pros and cons of doing things. And this is a real risk for Google's business, which is, their Google search business is clearly a very, very big component of their business. And I'd say that this is coming at a bad time for Google because you already have the economic weakness, the macro challenges where you see their Google advertising business. And I called this out in their earnings report. Their advertising business was down around 4% in the most recent quarter on a year-over-year basis. This is where they generate pretty much all their profitability. So this is hurting their margin significantly. Yes, their cloud business is growing, but this is still unprofitable. And so that is really a challenge to say, hey, this is declining. And then the Google search component, which is the biggest part of their advertising business, this is also now facing increased competitive threats from Microsoft. Now, Google tried to do this rearguard action saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, we know Microsoft has this cool thing with Bing that they're planning on launching, but we will launch Bard, and we will, Bard will be very impressive relative to ChatGPT. And so they did, an announcement today saying this is what we have to compete with. Now, instantly they posted on Twitter saying look, here's an example of, this experimental conversational AI service powered by Lambda. And they're saying, hey, what new discoveries from the James Webb Space Telescope can I tell my 9-year-old about? And then it gives you a couple of bullet points that you can relay. And this was from effectively the Google official account talking about this is how compelling our Bard chatbot is. And then the third bullet point, this immediately caused the stock price to sell off, is, so talk about the James Webb Space Telescope. Well, the third bullet point is about how the James Webb Space Telescope took the very first picture of a planet outside of our own solar system. These distant worlds are called exoplanets. Exo means from outside, But that is actually wrong. As NASA suggests, it was actually the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in 2004, which was well before the James Webb Space Telescope started taking that picture. And so this is causing folks to say, oh man, this is the same challenge that you're seeing with Chatgpt, where you're getting sort of this BS answers, but with high conviction. And that is a real challenge if you have an advertising driven business. Is you don't want to have misleading comments right next to an advertisement. In an advertisement, you want to say, hey, this is a legitimate good that you're able to buy, not sort of like, do I trust this? And so it's very clear you're going to need to keep these things separated from the official search, from the, here's sort of the chat box, and making sure you try to keep those two concepts separate. But how is Google even going to monetize that if you have someone like Microsoft saying, hey, we are such a small part of the pie relative to Google. We're going to do full press into making sure folks know about this and increasingly use Bing and their Edge browsers to take share from Google. And so what's this mean for Google stock? Where do I think personally Google goes from here? And full disclosure, this is not financial advice. I do own a little bit of Google stock at the time of this video publication. So when I think about Google, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think they do have some irreplaceable assets like YouTube. But I do think their Google search business is in the face of getting disrupted. I think the whole premise of how you search is going to change dramatically in the years ahead. And I think people will increasingly rely on intelligent chatbots. And it'll be some sort of, a hybrid solution. It's not clear exactly how it plays out. And when you look at market share statistics, different folks have different metrics. Clearly, Google has the vast majority, around 90%. But some of the data does suggest that they have been losing small amounts of market share actually to Bing over the last few years. Personally, I find that to be a little bit, I'm a little skeptical of that. But the fact is that, Satya Nadella from Microsoft, he talks about this as being just an absolutely humongous opportunity for them. They're saying, look, this is, I think the phrase he uses, more money. Google makes more money from search on Windows platforms than they make from Windows. I think that was, one of the things he said, which is sort of a mind-blowing figure to think about. Like, wow, because so many people use search, even when they're on a Windows platform, Google's just making tons of money. And so he's saying, hey, I don't really care how much I need to invest as long as I'm able to get some of this tremendous market and it's super high margins. And so Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he's very intelligently leaning into this and, saying, hey, even if the products aren't right, even if it's wrong, even if it gives wrong answers, I want that hype. I want that attention, because that could shift the tide over time in terms of market share, where people say, hey, you know what? What's the difference between using Bing and Google? Personally, I find Google to be better, but then again, maybe I'm biased because I'm a Google shareholder. I look at this and I have a couple of thoughts here. First of all, I think the search market, it is warranted to be cautious here. And that does mean that Google's core long-term free cash flow, there's more uncertainty. There's more uncertainty over how it plays out over time, especially because running this, chat-like interface, this supposedly costs a lot more per query than, let's say, just running a typical Google search. So that could also mean much lower margins going forward, or just at least a margin hit. And it's also, one should consider from a competitive dynamic, this is another thing that makes me cautious. Microsoft has very little to lose here in terms of putting capital into Bing, whereas Google has a lot to lose. And that sort of asymmetry makes me cautious. Seeing that Google is quickly trying to do some sort of rearguard catch-up move also makes me concerned about how does this play out. Google should have been the one that launched this first. Now, some might argue this might be the MySpace to the Facebook that, Google will come out with later. I personally think if you're the top dog, you need to be the one pushing the innovation. And so this is a challenge for Google right now. And this does not show well upon their leadership. And it does show, in my opinion, that they got complacent. And so that is part of the reason why I think you're starting to see the pressure, like Google stock being down 8% today. It's also looking at how the chat space plays out. These solutions have not been made available to the general public yet. You can do Chatgpt in terms of its, inquiries. And by the way, that is very far from perfect. Now, there's much better iterations that will be coming out later this year. But at this point, no one has really seen, from the public perspective, in terms of masses, millions of people, they haven't really seen the best solution where it's not, obvious that, there might be a problem here. And every time I use ChatGPT, I always have to, sort of check like, hey, how much is this is BS versus accurate? Now, some of it's very helpful, if you wanted to, tweak something or, give me a proposal for a story or something like, give me a bedtime story or write me a poem or something like that. So there's a novelty and cool aspect there. But how this business ultimately plays out, who's going to win long term, I don't think anyone knows for sure right now. And seeing sort of the giant elephants, the Microsoft, the Googles of the world say, hey, we're going to have to spend a lot of money to make this happen. It's not clear either of them are actually going to be significantly profitable. As you could see a situation where, and when I say significantly profitable, I mean, you could see Microsoft make this huge investment to grab market share that eats away from Google. So that hurts Google stock. And then Microsoft's making this investment that could be, costly for their own margins as well. So you could see a situation where they both don't win. And so I look at this as an increasingly sort of murky picture of, I want to start seeing how this plays out personally before, leaning in and saying, hey, I have high conviction here. I think what you can say with a high degree of certainty is that there's a lot more uncertainty. That's what you can say right now. You can say the picture has gotten a lot murkier. It's a lot harder to see how this is going to play out, at least in my opinion. It's not necessarily clear that there's going to be one big winner. There might be many winners, and it might not be Microsoft or Google. That's personally what I'm keeping my eyes out for, to trying to figure out who's going to be that $10 billion company or that $50 billion company that's now going to be a $1 trillion company because they're enabled by this. Whereas I look at the $1 trillion companies like Google and Microsoft, and I'm thinking, hey, it could go either way for them. This could be a huge win for them, but it can also hurt them in unexpected ways. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. I personally look at Google. I look at their weak recent earnings results. I look at macroeconomic pressure that caused by that, that impacted their advertising business. I see what Microsoft's trying to do. It would not surprise me if Google remains in the downtrend that we've seen the last few months. It would not surprise me to see Google stock back to the low 80s, maybe even lower. And so I'm very curious to sort of watch how that plays out. It's a small position for me. I've thought about even trimming it. Given it's so small, I'm just, going to hold on to it. But for my own personal portfolio, which I call out at unrivaledinvesting.com to my subscribers, and we also do have an exclusive Discord server available for annual subscribers where I'm interacting on a daily basis. So when I think about Google versus the rest of my portfolio, I'm looking for businesses that don't have that reinvention risk, where you're looking at the future and you're saying this business model's working, they're growing 10 to 20% a year, and I think that they can keep that up for the next 5 to 10 years because there's not this huge disruption risk. When I look at what's going on with Google, there's much more uncertainty. There is this reinvention risk, and it is uncertain how it plays out. And it's very clear that management is caught off guard by Microsoft moving so aggressively with OpenAI's ChatGPT. So we will see how this plays out. I personally would rather invest in things that I have more conviction in, whether or not it's a company that's, proven that they're growing and they're not facing some sort of existential threat, or finding companies that are just so cheap, trading, let's say, well below liquidation value or well below book value, that I say, hey, this is just still compelling, that the risk reward is so compelling. So those are the ideas I call out to my subscribers at unrivaledinvesting.com. At this point, I own a little bit of Google, but I'm not at the point where I'd be eager to buy a lot more. If anything, I would be inclined personally to trim a bit, even though it's already a small position, just because of this uncertainty that we're facing, not only from the macro situation, but also how this search battle plays out. Microsoft is not a small threat, in my opinion. If this video has been helpful for you, please make a point of hitting that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching Unrivaled Investing.